Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining Clean Coast Texas Lunch and Learn series. My name is Christina Lopez, and I'm the Coastal Coordinator here at the Meadows Center for Water and the Environment at Texas State University, and I'm going to get things started. So first, just some housekeeping items. We ask that you please remain muted throughout the event to help us with sound quality. You can have your video on or off, totally your preference. If you have any questions or comments during the event or after, please use the chat box. For our Q&A session, I will be pulling questions out of that box. And also, if you would like to right now take some time to introduce yourself in the chat box, feel free to share your name, your organization, and what brought you to the event today. Now I want to get to some introductions. So first, we have Allie Schlant. She is helping with all of our back-end tech support. If you have any Zoom issues, please send her a chat directly. Allie, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Allie Schlant. I work with Christina at the Meadows Center for Water and the Environment as the Coastal Program Outreach Specialist, and I'm just here, like Christina said, to make sure things run smoothly on the technical and electronic side. So message me if you have any issues.
Great. Thank you so much, Allie. Allie is also going to be dropping some helpful links in the chat during and after the event, so keep an eye out for those. Like I said, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. And next, I would like to introduce Jason Pinchback from the Texas General Land Office. Jason?
Hi, Christina. Thank you so much. And good morning, folks. Welcome to the Texas General Land Office Lunch and Learn series here with Clean Coast Texas. We're excited to have you here. Thank you so much for choosing to spend a few minutes of your time with us today, where we unpack important water quality and non-point source topics and go in depth. Today, we are featuring Dr. Katherine Jack, but before we go there, I'd like to share just a bit of information, both about Clean Coast Texas, as well about the coastal zone. Clean Coast Texas is guided by the Texas Coastal Management Program in partnership with numerous stakeholders, including state and local agencies. We work with coastal communities to facilitate non-regulatory, incentive-based programs and projects to enhance the management of non-point source and water quality. We support your efforts in your communities to assist in community planning, pursuing and implementing projects, and providing technical expertise and education for both staff as well as the public to reduce non-point source pollution and improve water quality in the coastal zone. We have expertise and some resources available to help you restore and protect your coastal natural resources, to address water quality and flood management for existing development, to help mitigate for existing issues such as localized pollution or non-point source related issues, and ultimately to try to do these things to enhance tourism, recreation, and economic vitality opportunities in Texas. We're in a place right now with our collaborative, which includes Texas State University Meadows Center for Water and the Environment, Texas Sea Grant, Texas Community Watershed Partners, with some supporting engineering firms. We're positioned right now to accept new partners, and we have a survey available for folks who would like to take that. And we have an opportunity right now to potentially engage your city to see if we can find opportunities to collaborate on some of these issues we're focused on here. We have an exciting talk today with Dr. Katherine Jack. Dr. Katherine Jack serves as the Texas Climate Program Director for the Nature Conservancy in Texas, where she leads the chapter strategy for climate adaptation and mitigation. Key initiatives include advancing the role of nature-based solutions and collaborating to support a low-impact, equitable, and durable clean energy transition. Dr. Jack worked for more than 20 years in local government and nonprofit sectors to create community-informed conservation solutions. Dr. Jack received her Bachelor of Arts in Environment and Society from Cornell University, a Master of Science in Environmental Resource Engineering in the International Development Technologies program at Humboldt State University, and a PhD in Environmental Science from University of North Texas. Dr. Jack is a fellow at SMU's Hunt Institute for Environment and Humanity, and we're really excited to have her today featuring her work and her colleagues' work in a publication that caught our attention on how the Dallas area has embraced green stormwater. I'll get that out eventually. Green stormwater infrastructure and what they're doing there. And we think that some of these ideas might have use and application in the Texas coastal zone. Dr. Jack?
Thank you so much, Jason. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. All right.
And it is loaded.
Can everybody see that? Are we good? All right. Well, thank you so much again, Jason and Christina and Allie, for the invitation and the Clean Coast Texas program. I'm always excited to speak about this project. And of course, you'll notice it is focused in Dallas, Texas, not the coastal zone. But it's my hope that many of you today will be able to take away something interesting and useful for your location as well. So off the top, I do want to also acknowledge our project funder, Light of Hill Philanthropies, who funded this analysis, and then our lead research team from Texas A&M AgriLife Extension, led by Dr. Fuad Jabber. And I know Sue Alvarez is on the line today from the city of Dallas. Both the Environmental Quality and Sustainability Office and Dallas Water Utilities were essential for our ability to perform this analysis. And then our partners at the Trust for Public Land provided help with our spatial analysis as well. So I'm going to start by just sort of similar to Jason, kind of laying the context with the challenges and the reason we embarked upon this project. Texas has the nation's largest annual state population growth. And with that, while we're excited to welcome people to the state, this rapid population growth is really placing pressure on our natural resources, driving fragmentation in land conversion, both of natural habitat and working lands, as well as just general green space. Particularly, we're seeing this around metropolitan areas. And up here in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, which you can see in the land use map on the left, we're the fastest growing metropolitan area in the United States year after year. Again, we're happy to, those of us who live here love to call it home, but we're really, really, really challenged with the increase in impervious surfaces. So I'm so pleased to see the concepts being considered along the coastal zone, hoping to get ahead of some of this development pressure. Additionally, with climate change, Texas leads the country in federally declared natural disasters. And if you can zoom in on this map, you can see the top line is flooding. We have persistent problems with flooding, but not just flooding. By 2036, the state climatologist predicts that we will have flooding in our cities increase up to 50% or even more. So apologies for the image here being a little bit blurry. This is from my friend Sue Alvarez, who's on the call for the city of Dallas. This is a map showing all the dots here represent the most recent needs inventory for the stormwater drainage system in the city of Dallas. And we have the city of Dallas city limits, and then we have 3 shades. Everything that is green are areas that were developed before there were standards for drainage, for stormwater drainage. The shaded light blue area, the drainage standards range from 5 years to 100 years storm. And then everything in that small darker blue area is built to the 100-year design standards. So the problem is when you have cities across the country that were built for previous conditions, previous populations, previous levels of impervious cover, it is very, very costly to upgrade the storm drainage system. So this $2.1 billion price tag is what the most recent needs, at least what I understand the most recent needs inventory. Sue can correct me later if there's been one since then, and if so, it'll be higher. To bring all of the problem areas across the city of Dallas up to be able to accommodate current, not future, just current drainage needs would cost $2.1 billion. But the 2017 drainage bond was able to allocate $48.75 million. That's a big gap. And part of the reason that our partners at the city are interested in looking at what can nature provide as a tool in the toolbox to solve this problem. I will say, you know, I work for the Nature Conservancy. We're a conservation organization. So we have a big platform of our strategies focused at integrating nature into not just urban areas, but across the landscape and looking at supporting nature-based solutions for all of the multiple benefits: flood resilience, water quality, habitat, connectivity, recreation, enhancing our recreative potential for the economy. We support nature-based solutions for multiple benefits, including to enhance storm resilience. And out of that work, in several cities, we've partnered with local government and other organizations to advance green stormwater infrastructure, which, if anybody's on the call that's not familiar, sometimes it's called low impact development or blue-green infrastructure. And it is the idea of borrowing from nature in environmentally engineered systems that recreate those natural hydrological processes to slow, hold, treat, and absorb and delay the movement of that water into the system. So one of the questions posed by our academic partners, and it wasn't a question, it was an assertion, but we wanted to find the data, was that we have a lot of data on the water quality benefits of these systems. And those systems come in a wide variety of best management practices, but we have less data on the urban flood mitigation potential. So we wanted to explore that. And our partners at the city have been advancing green stormwater infrastructure over many years. Ever since 2007, they've adopted as voluntary some of the regional design standards. It's called ISWIM. There's a link when the slides are shared out later, developed by the North Central Texas Council of Governments, which is also an 18-county area. I think I have that correct. They've been working to address barriers that were identified in a US EPA report conducted together with the city. They've included, they shifted to an impervious surface drainage fee. They've included incentives and encouragement, but so far, all voluntary, to include green stormwater infrastructure practices in bond projects and in complete streets. And most recently, they completed a comprehensive environmental and climate action plan that features nature-based solutions for many benefits, including a focus on evaluating their value for community resilience and flood resilience. That's where the study entered the scene. The question was asked, especially with limited budgets, where can we as a city prioritize investment in green stormwater infrastructure? Where would it most effectively enhance urban flood management within the city, considering capacity, cost, and the future impacts of climate change? So Texas A&M AgriLife Extension, who led the methodology, they proposed using hydrologic modeling and spatial analysis to help answer these questions. So the first part of the study was to take the watersheds within the city limits and identify the problem areas, and to treat those problem areas as opportunity areas to start directing investment in green stormwater infrastructure. So we wanted to identify these from a hydrologic perspective, priority sub-watersheds. And the map on the right that you'll see there, we actually have 6 of those, and I'll show those to you quickly. It's a little overwhelming. Those are the sub-watershed areas where we have identified problems in the drainage network. And how those were built, the team at AgriLife built swim models for each of the 10 watersheds delineated by the city of Dallas. And they ran these swim models to find out where, and the indicator was, you can see in the picture, I have a picture of a stormwater inlet. All of those dots, this is one watershed, 5 Mile Creek watershed at the south of town. All of those dots represent where, when the swim model is run, we show that we have limitations in the stormwater drainage ability to handle the water. So, and specifically, we have overflowing inlets showing up in each of those dots. So then in the final map down at the bottom, those are the contributing sub-watersheds. Each one of those little spots leads to one inlet that overflows when you ran the swim model. And we ran those for the 2-year storm, and I'll just click to the next map. The 2-year storm, which is 50%, the 10-year and the 100-year under current conditions. These are the current conditions maps. And then again, under climate change conditions, and I'm not going to explain here right now, but maybe in Q&A some of the assumptions, but we basically, they built the climate change 2045 precipitation models off of the IPCC's climate predictions, and I can explain more on that later, or Fuad can if he joins the call. So the punchline from part 1 was we identified the areas of concern. You can see them here. This is the current conditions 100-year storm. We really were able to hone in on these 2 watersheds in the south, where 5 Mile Creek has the most severe and extensive repeat problems. Joe's Creek in the north has a ton of the surface area is challenged, and then Cedar Creek is a pale yellow. It isn't as severe, but it's certainly persistent. And then areas of White Rock, which is the long, large north to south watershed there. No surprise, we found that with more precipitation, we have more what we call system hotspots, those areas where the existing stormwater network is undersized, according to our models. And then we found that climate change, consistent with what is predicted by the state climatologists, will result in an average increase in these system hotspots across all of the design storms that we ran. And the average across the storms is an increase of 26%. This is interesting. These two columns that are circled here show that, according to the models, tomorrow, 2045's 10-year storm will look a whole lot like today's 100-year storm. That's a problem. That's a challenge we need to take seriously. So in part two, we did a spatial analysis for current conditions only for the 2, 10, and 100. And all of those golden sub-watersheds are where we identified problems. Now we're treating them as opportunities. And we use several data layers that we received from the city and then our friends at the Trust for Public Land to look for potential deployment of 3 types of green stormwater infrastructure. We selected bioretention areas, rain gardens, and rainwater harvesting systems because volumetrically they were considered the most cost-effective potentially. And this is not a siting exercise, but we did look within these areas for opportunities to site in order to then estimate volumetric capture. And we applied standard designs for each system to everywhere we felt we could realistically place one of these systems. So this we would call is the maximum deployment scenario. These are, again, hard to look at, I'm sure, a little bit, the 3 maps that resulted, and then how the volumetric capture potential that we estimated for each of these design storms. And in a nutshell, the key takeaways here, we have plenty of opportunity to site these systems. The barriers are not about siting. They're about a number of other factors: willingness, familiarity, willingness to implement something different, questions about cost, any number of factors. We also found, and I think that this is important, that the bioretention areas, particularly in parking lots, really gave us the biggest bang for the buck. They were cost effective, there were widely available siting that were otherwise what we would call not very functional space. So, and I apologize, I know this is a lot to look at, but I'm going to walk you through the takeaways of this table here. On the left, we have all 10 watersheds, and then we have 3 big sections for the 3 current design storms, 2, 10, and 100. And the information that we found here are for each watershed, and then in total, what is the volumetric capacity if we from this maximum deployment scenario for these 3 types of GSI in each of these watersheds? What percent of the modeled overflow would we be able to capture if we put GSI in these watersheds, and at what cost? So we estimated the average cost per gallon captured with and without maintenance, because we all know that maintenance is an important part of these systems. And so I don't know if you can see my arrow, but the right columns are the maintenance included. So these are dollar per gallon. So what we found is that green stormwater infrastructure across all of the storms reduced the modeled overflows for all storms between 17% for the 100-year to 31% for the 2-year storm. We found that GSI, when comprehensively integrated, we found that GSI was 77% less costly than upgrading gray infrastructure alone to meet these modeled overflows. And I don't know if we can plop it in the chat, but in the survey, we have the link in the slides, in the study, we have in the appendix 4 has a very detailed, it's for me, one of the most beneficial parts of the study was this extensive literature review we did, just to look at across the country, what are the average costs for implementation and engineering, and maintenance for these types of systems. We really wanted to have an honest look at what does it cost to put in these systems, and how does that compare to upgrading great infrastructure. The other caveat is we're looking within the city of Dallas. So we use city of Dallas data and city of Dallas costs to estimate how much the city has spent generally on upgrading and replacing pipes. And it is very expensive when you are already developed out. The cost would look different if we were looking at a comparison for, say, a suburban new development, and we did not include that as a part of this study. But another big takeaway is the combination of green and gray provided the maximum and cost-effective benefits, so the most volume, and it was still less costly than just gray infrastructure upgrades alone. So finally, our last component of this study was sort of a pre-post. We entered the volume saved, captured in each of these watersheds into those original maps to look at what would happen across the city and in these problem areas if we had maximum deployment of GSI. And you'll see we still have challenges. It doesn't handle, GSI alone doesn't handle all of the overflows, but it certainly reduced the severity. We had fewer hotspots, much less severity with our flooding overall. And then possibly one of the most important findings is that we are able to achieve substantial peak flow reduction, meaning you don't have the overflowing inlets into the street as often. You can delay the time frame with which the water exits these systems and enters and drains out. So our application and next steps, and this is the purpose for us at TNC. We wanted this to be applied, and we continue to work with the City of Dallas and other partners. We've given the data layers to our friends at the Trust for Public Land, who have created a decision support tool that is used by the City of Dallas that includes several planning objectives, including equity and land use. And now our data is filtered into that tool so that when folks in the City of Dallas are investigating opportunities to invest in green space, our data can help inform that. We've also shared the layers with the City of Dallas, several departments, the OEQS, the Dallas Water Utilities, and we've had much interest from the Planning Department. They are updating their parking ordinance and considering requiring a greening factor, which is a wonderful, definitely ties into our main finding. And then Forward Dallas is their land use plan, and they're using the data as they complete that plan. And then additionally, I encourage you guys, when you get the slides, to click on the web app. We created a web app tool really to facilitate conversations with the city. And it includes additional data. This study was focused on hydrology, but we know when you're going to look at incentives, any potential ordinances, any pilot projects, we want to know who lives here. What are the land uses? So this is just a snapshot. We included the data from the US EPA's Social Vulnerability Index, and I just have called out here the 5 Mile Creek watershed, where actually we also have a couple of on-the-ground pilot projects, is in a very, it's a high percentage of population with low income and people of color in this watershed. It's also where we have the most consistently severe problems. So we do think it's important to take the hydrologic data and then look at other planning objectives together as you come up with potential solutions to the problems. So our conclusions quickly, climate change will continue to exacerbate urban flooding challenges in the cities, along with loss of our green spaces. So green stormwater infrastructure is an important, it's cost-effective tool for managing urban flooding and water quality, particularly when it's comprehensively deployed in the fabric of a city. We won't have a huge impact system-wide by one-off systems. We will have a direct impact on site, but we really want to encourage the system-wide thinking and ordinances that can help incentivize green stormwater infrastructure where it makes sense throughout the fabric of a city. Of course, green stormwater infrastructure has multiple benefits, including water quality, urban flood management, reducing urban heat island, enhancing the ecological function in the city landscape. In our two demonstration systems, we've included natives and pollinators to enhance the function on site. And then, of course, start with the most challenged areas. And parking lots was one of the big takeaways. And then this last bullet I added because I just wanted to flag that we really focused on smaller systems that would be integrated within existing real estate throughout the city. But we have seen the important value that stormwater parks, which are larger systems, can provide for flood mitigation, and we did not include that in the model. So we do advocate that those sorts of practices always be considered as well. So with that, I'm going to say thank you, and I'm going to stop sharing, right, Jason? Do I stop sharing my slides?
Maybe leave your contact up for a few minutes in case folks want to write that
Okay.
down. Thank you so much for that great presentation, Dr. Jack. You really provided a lot of information, and it made me want to extend this format so we can unpack some of that. So we'd love to have you back or one of your colleagues back. So thank you for that. A couple of things that intrigued me, and just one is the process in which you described of identifying problems, then using the models to understand the dynamics, looking at current conditions, and then modeled future conditions, using that to prioritize areas. And then as you positioned it, problems equal opportunities. And so I love the way that you place that. And then I'm just going to term this as practical. It's very practical to focus on the parking lots. And so, but one thing that struck me out of that review was one of the conclusions regarding cost. And there are many barriers for the propagation of GSI or green stormwater infrastructure. And one of them is cost. So we always get that question, but I'm really intrigued. If I have this right or not, please correct me, that green stormwater infrastructure is 77% less costly than going gray infrastructure alone. Now, I know that statement and these types of statements about cost can have a real mixed bag, but I was wondering, with maybe a wide range or a lot of different perspectives on the cost associated with GSI. And I was wondering if you could just address the cost and maybe couple that with the maintenance as well, if you could for a second.
Absolutely. And, it's come up, the costs come up in every single conversation we've ever had about green stormwater infrastructure. And there's several caveats, right? And in fact, we had an internal review with our organization and then with our principal investigator on his experiences locally. And we have found, that's why I referenced that Appendix 4 of the study. I do encourage everyone look, if you care about cost, which most communities do. The land cost has historically been, what's been flagged, but in all of these systems we're modeling, the land is already purchased. Someone owns that land, so it's an engineering cost. So we made sure to include engineering, which was about 20%. We did a very thorough literature review, and included in our literature review were 2 other literature reviews that had already been conducted. So what we looked at was we had high, medium, and low cost for each type of system that had been based on geographies across the country. And then we truth checked that for the region and for the state, and talked to other practitioners to make sure we were using real costs. But the reason I would say this really penciled out comparatively is cheaper, it's very important to recognize we were looking at the comparative cost of a built-out stormwater system that was severely undersized in many areas. So it's so much more costly to go into a place like the downtown city of Dallas and invest in digging up and replacing those pipes from small to very large pipes than it is perhaps to talk about the comparison in a new green space, where I would like to better understand that cost comparison. I think with either green and gray, it's cheaper to achieve the desired design storm up front. But that comparison was, 1, because we were looking at a built-out environment, but 2, because we were looking at a watershed scale. So not one-off, what is one system compared to one pipe? That wouldn't make sense. If we were to deploy several green systems within that subcatchment area, how would that compare with the gray pipe increase that would be required for the same volume, if that helps? And it's all site variable.
Well, thank you for sharing some information about that. Christina, I see we have some questions in chat. Will you help us address those? Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. All right, the first question that came in for you, Dr. Jack, is if you could please elaborate on what you mean by stormwater parks.
Oh, right. Okay, so that's a new bullet on my slide too, because I'm also I'm not an expert. I'm just beginning to be interested. There's something called Google Exploration Green in Houston. That's a Texas example, and there may be more. There are several in Florida, and they're just larger areas, usually Exploration Green, my understanding is it started with a former golf course, but they're areas, they're larger in scale, and they're always a combination of sort of naturalized retention. So you would have sort of natural wetlands that hold and store larger volumes all together, and they combine it with recreation value. So you have walking trails and whatnot. So it's just a way to have a larger volume handled in one spot while also achieving recreation benefits. Oh, I see the connection to Exploration Green. Great.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. The next question is, could you please address complaints about maintenance cost?
I may be able to address complaints about maintenance costs. I think that's a really important conversation, and I think it's going to take time, and it's going to take folks. So in fact, when we were preparing for today, I did not reach out to Dr. Jabber, but our lead PI on the researcher, he's housed out of Texas A&M in North Texas. His counterpart for the coast is Cheris York. And I feel like both of them have worked closely with communities on some of these issues, and he often gives lecture series on the implementation and the maintenance. But the point is, I think the problems that we're seeing is the newness to so many folks. It is just different for many communities still to handle the maintenance. So it's not more expensive, but it is different. So you have to get your staff up to speed on how to maintain. And in some cities, it's a totally different crew. So for example, in the city of Dallas, some of the systems are maintained by Parks and Rec, which is really different for the rest of the stormwater system. So I think that that is a challenge, and something that is a challenge for most communities to come up with the right plan. And I would love to see a seminar on best practices and success stories in Texas for folks who feel really great about their maintenance program. There are trainings available, certifications for maintenance, and that could be one way to help. And I may misspeak, but I feel like San Antonio may have a training program that includes maintenance. It's worth our following up to find out.
Great. Thank you so much. Now, this next question, I think you touched on a little bit, but for the sake of the person that asked, I wanted to re-ask for clarification. Did the construction cost estimates include land cost?
So in the appendix 4, when we looked at all of the literature reviews, a couple of the cost figures, we averaged several different cost sources, and I believe a couple of them did, but by and large, no, they were including engineering, because these systems are largely not involving purchasing land. Somebody owns the land, you are retrofitting that parking lot, or you're adding to the park. For example, we have 2 on-the-ground systems in Dallas, and someone else owns the park. We are retrofitting to add the bioretention systems. But something like a stormwater park, that would be a part of that assumed cost.
Great. Thank you so much for clarifying. All right. The next question asks, what is your experience with using permeable surfaces like Thirstycrete and other alternatives to concrete and asphalt that are permeable? Any good or bad experiences to share?
I have no personal experience. I will say, as a part of a grant for a park, a demonstration project here in Dallas, we've included in our project a middle section of permeable parking, but it's Dr. Jabber who's leading on that design with the park engineers. And I don't know if he's on the call. I haven't seen him pipe in, so I think he wasn't able to make it today. He's the expert. I am definitely not, so I apologize.
Thank you for that. And then there was an additional question that was actually answered in the chat by Susan Alvarez from the city of Dallas. But the question asked, how did you go about identifying the priority watersheds? How did you decide on your approach? How did you decide when to put green infrastructure at the site versus above, below, or within the problem areas? So maybe if you want to provide your own response to that and elaborate.
Yeah, because it's perfect. So we did meet with the city, but I will say it was independent. And we did not use, if you read the study, I'll be honest, we didn't use the word priority within the study. We used challenged, but when I'm speaking about it now, I'm using the word priority because hydrologically speaking, we did prioritize these watersheds. So that was the purpose of the hydraulic modeling. So that was, we used US EPA's SWIM 5.1, we meaning Fuad's team, not me. And they built those detailed hydrologic models to show where that is purely you enter all of these different data layers, precipitation, soil types, elevations, digitized stormwater network, and it shows where, with a variety of precipitation events, 2, 10, and 100, where is the stormwater system undersized, essentially, according to the models. And so that was where, when those red spots were all where the model showed us the existing stormwater network was not keeping up with the rain, not able to properly drain. We would have overflows. Those synchronized with the priority watersheds that the city of Dallas had already had customer complaints, knew were issues, but we had some independent modeling verify that, yep, we're seeing these as issues. So then we went into those areas. The assumption we made was, with limited budget, let's start with where we know we're having problems to further evaluate the potential for green stormwater infrastructure to alleviate some of that.
Great, thank you so much. That's all the questions from the chat, but I do have a quick question. This study is amazing. It seems so comprehensive. So what would you say to a city that wanted to replicate this study?
That's the best question. I almost put the bullet on and I said, let's just wait and see if it's asked. Okay, honestly, 2 things. I think up front, targeting, it was super time and labor intensive for the study team. I feel very badly for Bardia, who was leading the modeling, because they did not realize the limitations of available digitized data. So this relied on having digitized stormwater data. So either you have to take paper plats and hand digitize those, which this study team did digitize several of the layers of data from the city. The city had some digitized information. So any city that has digitized stormwater network, it's going to be so much easier to do this. If not, I would limit upfront the area to those areas you already suspect based on your customer calls and your own experience, because the staff knows where they're seeing problems, and you could limit your study just to those areas.
Great, thank you so much. All right, we do have another question in the chat. What are your thoughts about how cities can modify their development codes to support future green stormwater infrastructure?
And I was gonna say Sue Alvarez will have, she's in the middle of this all the time working at, so she said greening factors. There are so many best management practices out there. And I will say, if you look across, we're Texas, so we need to do things our own way. And there is an effort, there's more than one effort underway where some different nonprofits as well as government agencies are trying to evaluate ordinance best practices from an ordinance perspective. In North Texas, there's design criteria that COG attempted to, that's the iSwim that I had the hyperlink, tried to help our 18 county areas have something that might be easily adopted into their design criteria. So that's one thing. I think having an impervious design fee, that's not an ordinance necessarily, I think is very helpful. But I love the greening factor. So in the city of Austin, one of our staff has also worked on a greening factor of kind called functional green, where they took their problem, a 10,000 acre problem area of Austin that's highly developed, very high impervious surfaces, and looked at not just green stormwater infrastructure, several different greening interventions, green roofs, vertical, all of these different, and came up with a way that they're recommending folks can score interventions to meet the criteria there. So there's, and I'd love to hear Sue talk more about the greening factors they're proposing specific to parking in the city of Dallas. I don't know if she's able to do that, but they're really, really looking at that.
Thank you very much. Yes, I don't know if she would like to speak on that right now. We could invite her to unmute herself. I think she.
I'm here.
Hi.
I was hoping to be off camera, but so part of our climate planning effort looks at, there's a couple of things. One is our city drainage code invokes a higher standard under FEMA, which is a 100-year minimum design storm. plus adding an additional foot of freeboard to assessment of those floods. That said, that's where that 2.4 or whatever it is now billion comes from, is designing to that standard. One of the critical pieces coming out of the work that Dr. Jack has done is she has shown that we can incorporate green infrastructure as a way of slowing the hydrologic response of the watershed, so that that 100-year storm is reduced by storage across the area. Additionally, as we were doing our climate planning, we've got some other like commingled challenges. One is that we're under severe non-attainment for air quality. And how does that affect green infrastructure, you might ask? Well, we need to expand our green areas, and we need to expand our canopy to help improve local air quality. The work we do for those greening factors is significantly important to reducing the urban hydrologic response in the watershed. So it all goes kind of hand in hand. We are looking at significant traffic and transportation issues related to growing population and a lot of I'm losing the word right now, but traffic issues daily. And so we are trying to reduce the number of people that are driving by themselves and happily parking downtown, and we're making it really easy and cheap to park. So from a policy standpoint for air quality, and we're under severe non-attainment, the hammer is sitting there ready to fall on us. So from an air quality standpoint, we need to get people out of their cars, get less people parking, make it not as easy and convenient to park so that we can encourage more people in mass transit. The end of that is how we are looking at reducing parking minimums, which is driving a lot of parking lots. And we found that 60 to 80% of our parking lots are underparked, even at 3 in the morning. So we're building a lot more parking than we need, which is a lot more impervious surface than we need. And so we're looking at greening factors, or a system of greening factors, to both incentivize not building that much parking, and also to help green up an ultra urban, in many cases, watershed. And so it's all kind of tied together. Our sustainable development group, if you look up Dallas and sustainable development and/or planning and urban design and parking, they've done extensive analysis on this in support of changing our own development standards. So hopefully that helps, but it's all tied together.
And just a couple of other, I know we like to look within, thanks, Sue. And by the way, Sue is the Assistant Director of Dallas's City Office of Environmental Quality and Sustainability. I'm not sure I gave your title, and has been a partner on this effort and other sort of nature-based solutions efforts. So they're doing great work there, and I always appreciate you joining in. We often co-present. So I guess I wanted to also say some non-Texas examples. Sometimes when we're looking for ordinances that we could make Texify, the reason that other cities, Philadelphia, Detroit, the Seattle area, many cities around the country, I would say, are really far ahead with their, adoption of green stormwater infrastructure and making it a normalized tool within a suite of tools for water quality. I mean, when you can walk around the street in Seattle, you see these giant off the buildings of downtown. You see cisterns integrated and bioretention on the sidewalk in art form almost. So it's really quite astounding for me to see what it could look like. But the incentives in many of these locations were stronger consent decrees, were the hammer related to water quality. So many of the cities that lead the way across the country for green stormwater infrastructure were incentivized because they had combined sewer and stormwater. So every time you would have a huge rain event, or often with a large rain event, you would have overflowing sewers and be fined. And so there was a hammer driving a lot of the early ordinances and best practices by what I consider United States leaders with advancing green stormwater infrastructure. So I'm glad that we don't have that, although because we also don't have combined sewer and stormwater, we have our stormwater going directly into our water bodies without any treatment, which is also a problem in and of itself. So I think there's an opportunity to lead without that challenge here. And I think in Texas, when we get behind something, we come up with really creative solutions fairly quickly. I know we have the ability to do that. I do think we have incredible engineers and developers. The development community in North Texas is really advanced, but we don't have that much familiarity still with green stormwater widely. We have a few firms that are specialized and have hired and developed in-house to really get to know those systems. And I'd like to see it more widespread and more valued. And there's always a question: is it the ordinance? Is it the customer demand? And probably all of the above.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Jack. I wanted to thank everyone who submitted questions as well. That's it for the questions from the chat.
Well, Dr. Jack, we really do appreciate you sharing the information here. A couple of takeaways that I'm hearing is one, there's not a silver bullet. There's not one single thing that can be used. As we see in some other coastal examples, such as Tampa Bay and their restoration program they've used for their estuary there, it's taken over 30 years, but they've implemented hundreds and thousands of different best management practices, such as integrating the green stormwater infrastructure. Something that strikes me with the example in the study area are the resources of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And obviously, being a large metropolitan area, they have access to different funds and different technologies. And what we're finding sometimes in our coastal communities is that, for instance, I mean, they're taking care of the normal services, but they are also responding to hurricanes and other activities that are coming into the coastline and impacting major swaths of area that often put the community into years of recovery. And so what we're recognizing with some of the communities is that they're dealing with the day-to-day, keeping the plumbing working, keeping the streets right, keeping the electricity running, dealing with a lot of important priorities, but often there's a gap in the resources available to address some of these issues here. Clean Coast Texas has positioned itself to work with communities. We have a buffet, if you will, or a document that will be placed in the link here that will talk about our menu of services. And in that, different municipalities or counties or planning organizations here in the coastal zone can take a look at that. And please let us know if you see some things that might resonate with you and your community needs. We continue to look for partners and ways that we can collaborate together with our dynamic team. So with your review, Dr. Jack, I think it's left a lot of information we still need to unpack, and that's a great way to leave everybody wanting a little bit more information. We really do appreciate your presence, your information, and your willingness to share some time with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And of course, anybody is welcome to and invited to follow up with an email to me with any follow-up questions. And I thank you again for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you so much. Sure appreciate it. And thanks, Allie, for the tech support. And thank you, Jason Pinchback, and everyone for attending. Y'all take care.
See you in a couple of months.